on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 3 live stream for the Hero World Challenge. Gonna mix in some Nedbank Challenge stuff as well on top of that on the DP World Tour side, but gonna get you ready for all of your exposure on Saturday, whether it's on the DFS side or with your props on Underdog and Prize Picks for tomorrow. So feel free to hit me up with any questions in chat if you guys are able to catch this one live. But we're gonna go through a weather report, ownership in the large field GPPs. We'll talk about building a player pool for tomorrow as well. A look at some of the shots gained metrics that are available, even though they're maybe not as reliable as what we're used to seeing, and then some stat averages and some betting exposure for tomorrow as well. And that'll include the props on Underdog and Prize Picks, but also a few matchups on the sports books as well. So by the end, you have a little taste of everything for moving day, and hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for your exposure. But let's get things started off with a look at the golf course, which played a little bit easier than what we had in round 1. So there's about a 0.1 stroke difference from round 1 to round 2. So not a really big difference there. Course conditions were easier for today, but you did have some slightly harder pin locations. So that's why it wasn't like a half a stroke to a stroke easier like I thought it could be there. But with a moving day setup coming up, the easiest of the 4 rounds that we have at the Hero World Challenge, we probably are going to see that scoring average get easier once again. And the reason for that is similar weather out there to what we had on Thursday and Friday. Some wind that's picking up in the afternoon, but nothing over 10 miles an hour sustained. And your wind gusts are pretty much non-existent as well. So course conditions are going to be rather consistent for pretty much the entire event this week. The big change is going to be that pin location setup, which if you take a look at some of these early par 3s, like 2, for example, hole number 5, they were the hardest of all the pin locations that you could get at those holes. Back right pins that required you to take on bunkers to really narrow portions of the green. If they have them in the moving day spots, which I haven't been able to break down the pin location seat yet, that could be about a stroke difference on those holes. And then 18 was the hardest pin by far that you could have for round number 1. I mean, look at the difference from round 1 to round 2. Round 1, it played 0.5 over par. It did play downwind for round number 2, but it played 0.75 strokes easier than what you had for the first day. So pin locations are going to have a pretty drastic impact on some of these averages. So on the prop side, that's something that you're going to want to stay on top of. But from the weather standpoint, at least when we're considering DFS, there's not that much impact for tomorrow because it's 20 players. It's continuous two sums off of the first hole. There's not really an opportunity for that sort of a weather edge. Like maybe there would be like, if there would be like a massive increase in wind towards the last couple hours of play, like we could try and target some earlier guys, but it's not looking like that's going to be the case. That would be the only scenario where on a 20 player slate, you'd be really playing any sort of a weather edge. But before we start talking about shots gained metrics, actually building a player pool for tomorrow, let's go through ownership at the top end of the board. And it looks like we got my guy Antonio in chat. Welcome on in, my man. He said, how's the fam been? Pretty good. It was nice to see them for Thanksgiving and whatnot. And it's that time of year. We got Christmas coming up. My birthday is this month, so I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully you're having a fantastic time as well. And he said, thoughts on Keegan? Pretty bad day, but he did make 5 birdies. Yeah, he's in contention. He's up there in the mix. I like Keegan at this golf course. There's a reason why I bet him. Actually, I didn't bet him this week. It was one of my core plays that we had for this golf tournament. He's a good course fit, good putter on Bermuda for most times. I can get behind a little bit of a Keegan bounce back. I'll show you the stats on that a little bit later on, but I don't think you're too far off with that. He said he hit a 4-leg parlay for the under on strokes. There you go. He said he had Straka, Batia, and the GOAT Wyndham Clark. We're eating good tonight. Let's see if we can run that back for tomorrow, Jose. It was an okay day for me. It wasn't that much more than break even personally, but we'll take it, right? It wasn't like we lost our hat or anything, and we still got moving day and Sunday to get after it. So I'm glad you had a little bit more success than I did, and we'll try and run that back for tomorrow. But let's go through the ownership at the top here. So we've got all the ownership on here for tomorrow, and it's the same kind of dynamic as what we had for main slate and for round 2 showdown, where Scotty Scheffler is by far the highest owned player that we have on the slate. But now that we've had 2 rounds to work with, there's a little bit more polarization elsewhere. And what I mean by that is that the top end guys, the guys are at the top 5, top 10 of the leaderboard, are finally starting to get that extra ownership. So you can see, for example, a JJ Spawn's 34% owned. I've got a Cam Young at 37% owned in the large field GPPs. They had been closer to 32 to maybe 33% the last couple of days. And your low owned guys up top now are closer to 20%, like Sam Burns, who did not have his best stuff out there. It's not like he's playing terribly at -3, but he's not in that -9 to -10 range like some of these other guys are. They're starting to be a little bit overlooked. And this is the large field GPP ownership. It's not necessarily indicative of what you're going to see in single entries or cash. Single entries or cash, there's going to be even more polarization than what you're seeing here. And I mean that these higher owned guys are going to be even higher owned in those sort of contests. Scotty probably closer to 55 to even 65% ownership. And then even players like a Spawn and a Cam Young will probably be closer to 40 to 45% owned in a lot of those sort of contests, which means these other guys, the guys in between, get squeezed and are going to be lower owned than what you see here. So, for example, a McIntyre at -4, Burnsy, who we have already mentioned, but maybe even a Keegan Bradley at $8,600 could be sub 20% or even sub 15% in some cases in some of the single entry contests. So you can start to think about getting some ownership differentiation in those kind of builds. I think at the large field GPPs, you're kind of struggle to do so, especially when you're in a large field GPP against a bunch of other entries. There's just so many combinations that, it's going to be hard to differentiate yourself unless you're leaving salary on the table, which, like we've mentioned to this point of this week, is a viable way to still play some chalk and try and get a somewhat unique lineup in those large field GPPs. But it's going to be even more so the case for tomorrow, though. We're starting to see that separation with the ownership. And when we get the placement points in play and that top 5, top 10 becomes even more important than what we have right here, then it's going to ramp up even more on top of that. So there are some guys like Keegan, maybe Sam Burns, you can use to get cute with, but it's still 20%, maybe 15% ownership on those sort of players. A few other guys that are getting steam, you can see Hideki, I've got it like 35%, Batia at about 34% ownership. Wyndham Clark, also Alex Noren are getting a ton of steam towards the bottom end of the board because they're the guys that are playing the quote-unquote best golf so far, and they're going to be maybe an extra 5 to 10% higher owned as a result. But even at this portion of the board, like the biggest example of a leverage piece would be Jordan Spieth at about 20%, but even he's half the ownership of a Wyndham Clark. And a lot of times when we get into the 6K range, we've got guys that are like 7 to 8% owned and guys that are legit 0% owned at the bottom end of the board. But more realistically, like 0.1 to 0.2% owned at that portion. The percentage change from a 20%er to a 40%er is 100% difference, right? It's double the ownership from 20 to 40%. When you're going from like a 0.2 to an 8% ownership difference, it's in orders of magnitude bigger than what you have with that sort of just a double difference from your lowest to your highest owned player. So that's why I would say that the ownership maybe means a little bit less on this kind of a slate because you don't have as much ownership leverage to be had, but it still matters, especially when you're making sure that you're not going to duplicate yourself with a whole lot of other people out there. But yeah, in a 20 player field, there's not going to be a whole bunch of spots that you can actively leverage yourself on outside of maybe single entries or cash where you're going to get some of those guys at like 10 to 15% owned. So for this projection sheet to see my entire player pool for tomorrow, guys, just a PSA, but you guys can find that on my Patreon page. The link in the description of the video to go out there and join there. Golf DFS tier is how you get access to this. Everything that's blacked out, of course, is not blacked out on the Patreon version. And over here to the right, you can see the kind of player pool tags that I'm using. And it's the same as yesterday. I'm looking for course history and high upside players. Those are mainstays in our exposure every single round. I added Bermuda grass putting because that's the kind of grass that we're on this week. But I'm going back to some ball striking poppers in some short game regression candidates. So these are normally really, key cornerstones of our analysis on this channel, right? Looking at the shots gained metrics, seeing how they did it for one round and how they're trending into the next. The issue this week, and the reason why I'm only sprinkling them in for tomorrow, is that they're unreliable. If you guys go with some of the shot trails, you'll see that they're egregious in a few cases. There were guys that were quote unquote missing 2 to 3 foot putts that I imagine were a lot longer than 2 to 3 feet. So the shots gained metrics are a lot wonkier than what we typically see on the PGA Tour. So I'm only using them in the most extreme examples, which was the same thing that we did yesterday, except that I didn't have a whole category for them, right? I more so just kind of blended them into the other categories on there. But if they gained like 3 to 4 strokes ball striking or they lost 4 strokes putting, that's a big enough buffer there, right? 3 to 4 strokes is significant gains or losses in any one category, that even some of that variance, they still probably gained or lost in that specific category, right? So that's why I'm okay doing this with the most extreme examples in those both categories. But if you're telling me he gained a half a stroke to a stroke per to the field in any one category, I don't know if that's actually legit, right? One of those shot trails could completely throw that off and make it look the complete opposite way, which is why I think you want to be a little bit careful about the exposure that you're going with this week. So the thing you want to take away from this is having a rhyme and reason for all the plays that you're getting to. Even in a 20-player field, you shouldn't just be picking names out of a hat. Ownership matters, getting leverage matters. All of that is, very important when it comes to the lineup construction standpoint, but making sure that the player pool that you're choosing from is also very intentional is half the battle as well. And we're going to go through some shots gained metrics next, show you guys exactly how they were playing for round number 2 and how maybe they're trending into moving day 2. So if you guys have any player pool deep dives that you want, feel free to let me know. I know we already had one in the chat about Keegan Bradley. So we'll start off there and then go through the rest of the chat. Oh, mouth was getting really dry there. But let's see. So Keegan around number 2 lost in all 4 categories. So didn't have the best score round, but did make 5 birdies or better. Just gave it all away with bogey production. So I would say if he cleans that up, that's close to an optimal performance if you shoot something like -4, -5. So I'm okay with the Keegan Bradley bounce back, but the shots gained profile is not the reason for it. However, just like I was saying, the shots gained profiles are going to be extremely wonky because of the kind of situation that we have here. So I wouldn't hold it against him too much. And I, in fact, still like him for a pretty decent bounce back spot. What's going on? Jay says, how do I decide on which contest to enter? You're finding it hard to decide which ones are best. And what do I look for? So it's really dependent on each player, right? Like it depends on your play style. Some people like the large field GPPs, like playing portfolios. Some people like single entries. Here's a few things that are pretty much indisputable that everyone should be looking for, but size of the contest, amount of entries that you're entering, there's going to be a wide variety out there, right? So it's kind of just choosing what you like to play. Some people are better at other things than others. I like large field GPPs. I like 150 maxes where I can, but I only enter them when they make sense, when there's a large enough contest for it to be a lottery contest, when there's a big enough payout to first place, but you don't want them to be too top heavy with those payouts. So what I normally look for is close to 10% to first place. That is the ideal payout structure, because if there's 10% to first place, that means the rest of the top 5, top 10 is going to have respectable payouts. That's something that regardless of the contest you're looking at, you want to have as close to 10% to first, because if it's 30 or 35, 40% to first place, I mean, that has a massive impact on the rest of that payout structure. So that's kind of one non-negotiable for me, is a decent payout structure. And then the rake, right? Obviously, certain contests have different levels of rakes, some of them larger than others. You want the contests that have the lower rakes, where you're not paying as much of that in-house edge towards Draftkings. If you can minimize that, also find contests with a little bit of a flatter payout structure, then that's the go-to. But, in terms of single entries, 2 to 3 maxes, 150 max, that's just all personal preference. So do what you're good at, what you find the most success with. If you have an optimizer, that makes a 150 max a whole lot easier. But if you're building by hand, then yeah, you're probably not entering 150 max, right? So that's just all very personal. But you want to look for the low rake, the 10% to first kind of contest. Those ones are the absolute nuts. Thoughts on Clark's under at 69.5? He's plus 110. So yeah, if he's plus money towards the under, that makes it a lot more intriguing. I think the scoring average is going to be -3 to -3.5. Maybe even easier than -3.5 if the pin locations are as easy as they could be. We're going to have to deep dive those before I can say that with any sort of certainty. But assuming that it's a little easier than what you had for the first couple days, yeah, plus money on that is a very reasonable take. And I think plus 110 is something I would bite on myself. Unfortunately, Hard Rock Bet here in Florida does not offer the round score bets for any given day. But yeah, I'm okay with that. And more on the prop section here in just a few minutes. I do think it's going to play easy in that there's some unders on strokes, some overs on birdies. That could make a little bit of sense. You saw Keegan miss on 18 for a bogey. Yeah, he also had a bogey on the hole before that as well. So it was kind of a sour end, and he played a lot better than I think the scorecard would indicate. Speed, losing strokes, putting, and ball striking, and just gaining short game sums it up. Yeah, he's rusty. You kind of expect that returning from injury, but yeah, you summed it up pretty perfectly, right? Lost a whole bunch of strokes putting once again. I mean, it's Bermuda grass. He's normally pretty good on that surface, so would not be surprising, at least to me whatsoever, over the next couple of days if Jordan Spieth has a massive putting day. So I think he's more of like a Lorchel GPP play. You can't really trust him with that rust going on, but in the right format, right, in a big field contest where you're trying to beat like 1,000 or a couple thousand other people, he's going to be one of the lowest, maybe even the lowest owned player that we have on the slate. And there's at least a little bit of utility in that sort of thing. Let's see. Do I think Goddard's performance is him being nervous playing in this tournament for the first time? No, it's an exhibition event. I don't think anyone's nervous playing in the Bahamas. He said he could see him relaxing and having a good weekend. I do think that he's got a bounce back in him, but if you take a look at his scorecard or the shot trails, at least if they're accurate, he just can't chip. He had a ball out of bounds today, so that led to a double. But the round number 1, he chipped the ball all around the green and made a double bogey. I think it was the drivable par 4 today, the one on the front 9. He did the same thing. He just chipped the ball all around that green. This is the hardest course, in my opinion, in the world to chip on. Literally, of any golf course that I've ever seen in professional golf, he's just not a very good chipper, at least with Bermuda grass and grainy surfaces. On bent grass, towards the middle to end of last year, he chipped like an absolute champ. That's why you saw him in the top 5, top 10 of events. But some of these guys, and it makes sense, he's a Midwestern dude. He went to Rutgers. He's from New Jersey. They don't play on grainy Bermuda grass in New Jersey. You know where he went to school? He went to Oklahoma and Rutgers. Both of those schools. You're not playing on Bermuda grass. He's just not used to this sort of agronomy, and it exposes some of the younger guys more than the older ones. The older ones, especially the ones that live down here in South Florida, when you make your wealth on the PGA Tour, you move to Jupiter, you move to the nicest place in America, right down here where I live, and you play the world's best golf courses on grainy Bermuda grass. It's not an issue anymore, right, after you get used to it. But that's the issue. It's not him being nervous. It's an exhibition event. Let's remember that. These guys don't really care. They're here because Tiger Woods asked them to, because they're going to get to see him over the next couple of days, and it's a guaranteed payout. That's why they're showing up. He said PGA hole locations are out. Yeah, I'll look at those after the live stream. We're not going to do them here together. Just takes too long, and I've got some stuff to get to tonight, like making some dinner. Thank you for the breakdown. That definitely helps, of course. Any other questions, feel free to let me know. He says, hello, Goat. You got an outright on Novak, Horschel, and Clark. What am I take based on what I've seen so far? So, I mean, those aren't my favorite players for this week other than Clark. I love Clark this week because of the off-the-tee prowess. Outrights, though, going up against Scotty Scheffler and some of these other guys, I think you're up against it, but you got really good odds on those players, I'm assuming, in this sort of a field. I mean, you've got to like where they're standing so far, right? I mean, especially a Horschel and a Clark in particular up there towards the top end of the board. Guys like Novak, Horschel might have a hard time closing on that sort of thing. But yeah, Wyndham, especially now that he's in position, he's a guy that's won a major. He's won other signature field events before. Would not surprise me if he found a lot of success this weekend. In fact, he's one of the more streaky players that we have on the PGA Tour. So the fact that he put together 2 good rounds in a row is, I think, a really good sign for him. Horschel, not to give you too much smack on that one, but he's coming back from injury. I don't expect too much from him over the next couple of days. Novak, I could more so see it from, but he's starting further back. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an outtake there, but really, really good bet on Wyndham Clark. I wish I would have bet him outright myself. I only bet Scotty Scheffler this week, so I went with just a single bullet outright with the terrible odds on Scotty Scheffler, but I liked myself some Wyndham Clark in DFS, so I think I was a sharp one, and best of luck out there with that. Let's take a look at these shots gain metrics real quickly. I did want to show you guys some of the top poppers, as I was saying before. So if you look at ball striking, the best 2 players in the field were JJ Spawn and Cam Young. So maybe you want to give them a little bit of extra boost. But this is what I mean. These guys that gained like 1 to 1.7 strokes ball striking, I really don't know if it matters. I mean, it could have just been variance. It could have been the shot trails being incorrect. But when you're 3 to 4 shots into the positive, it wasn't hole outs, like they weren't holding out for approach play. I went through the shot trails on these 2 guys. That's not why that was the case. They were just throwing darts out there on the back 9. So I trust those 2 a little bit more than most of the field. If we look at the short game stuff, the guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes putting, right, you could say could be a little due for a little bit of a bounce back. Jordan Spieth, though, has been dog shit putting for 2 straight days. Maybe that's the rust. Maybe it's just him not playing professional golf for 4 to 5 months. That could be the reason for that. But these guys that like lost 0.8 to like 1.3 strokes with the putting, I don't know if we can really call them short game regression candidates. It's just not the kind of week where the shots gain metrics are as reliable as what we'd be hoping for. So I'm personally not using it as much in my process. So there are a couple guys that are in there with the ball striking, a couple of short game regression candidates that I'm getting to, but it's definitely a smaller piece of the puzzle than normal. Now let's go to the prop and betting side. As mentioned, I think there's some value that we have on these boards. Hero World Challenge, first thing I'll say is that I think the scoring average can be around -3 to -3.5. Birdie average will probably go up at least a little bit, maybe to like 5.4 to 5.5 per round. Bogey or worse average, it might go down a little bit as well. It was only 1.85 per round, I think, in round 1, if memory serves me correctly. It was lower than the 2.4 mark for sure, though, for the first day. So it would not surprise me if that went down closer to like maybe 2 per round. Feels a little bit more reasonable. And then I do have the fairway and the green average on there. fairway average was 9.6, green average was 11.8 per round, but we haven't been getting those on the sports books or on the pick'em sites. So I just, included them for completion's sake on there so you guys can kind of get an idea for how the golf course was playing. But both of those went down. The average for fairways in round one was closer to 10 per round. The green regulation average, I believe, was like 12.2 per round, something like that. It was higher than what you had there with 11.8 though. So maybe those do raise a little bit with the moving day setup, them perhaps moving up a tee box or two to make the golf course a little bit easier. But considering that the pricing it's just a little bit more positive than what it was for the day before, I still think that there's some value to be had. In fact, there's some guys at 69.5 that makes sense for an under. They just have to shoot -3 and match the field average to go under. There's some guys at 5.5 birdies that are elite tier birdie makers. I think you can take too. Same thing for bogeys or worse. So there are some elite bogey avoiders in the field that they have at 2.5. However, Underdog is the only site with props up at this point. And if you take, bogey or birdie props on Underdog, you get a 2.58x payout, which, I'll just be the first person to tell you that's absolute bullshit. Never enter a 2-leg for that sort of payout, especially, I guess, unless it's a multiplier that's getting you to that sort of a number. Then there's a time and place where you could actually take that sort of a line. It wouldn't be as bad. But 2 50-50 props. Remind yourself of what this is here, okay? This is a 2-leg parlay with 50-50 props. We'll put those in quotes, right? Because obviously the price that they're giving you here is not 50-50 on these sort of props. Is plus 158. I know the 2.58x payout makes it look like it's plus 258. It's not. It's plus 158 is what you're getting on that 2-leg payout. Go to a sports book and take 2 50-50 lines. And again, on there, it's like -110, -105, whatever they have on the sports books, and parlay those up. And then look at the payout and compare it to what you're getting here on Underdog. It is laughable. In fact, it is so laughable that there's just, again, if you're playing that sort of a payout on a 2-leg slip, you're an absolute clown unless you're dealing with like the best value humanly imaginable. And I do like these two props. I am going to try and enter them at some point. Maybe when Prize Picks post a board, which they still don't have up at this point, we'll be able to do so over there for 2.75x. Their payouts are a little bit better, right? It's a plus 175 payout if you're getting the 2.75x. But it's a lot better than 2.58x like you're getting here in Underdog. But Hideki, I think he was like -130, -135 towards the under on DraftKings. He's an elite tier bogey avoider. He's somebody that's really good at chipping on this grainy Bermuda grass, unlike a Goddard, right, who looked lost out there. Guy like Hideki is somebody that's extremely used to this sort of surface. In fact, he thrives on that grainy Bermuda grass. Sam Burns on the other side of this, I think the average might go up to like 5.5 birdies per round. He's a top 25 birdie maker on tour. He's one of the best Bermuda grass putters that we have on tour. He's also -130 towards the over on DraftKings. That would make a whole lot of sense. It's just that the payout on this obviously isn't good enough for me to go out there and enter it myself. So, like I said, Prize Picks probably the better way to go out there and grab that. We're going to go through a Prize Pick slip here in a second together. You can see those two props on the screen. But what you can do here in Underdog is if you like some NFL stuff or NBA, any of the other sports that are going on right now, is just take one golf and then one of those props, and then you're going to get the full 3x payout. So that's probably what I'm going to do. You guys know I break down a lot of the NFL boards for my Patreon members. And what I'm going to do is that if you're a golf member or you're an NFL member and I do a combo slip between those two different sports, you're going to get it regardless, even if you're only signed up for one of those two sports. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for that a little bit later on tonight if you guys are a part of the Patreon page. But that's how I'm going to approach the Underdog side of things. I think that's just the best way to do so. Ideally, to try and find some plus EV props on the NFL side. And then for Prize Picks, though, we do have some Nedbank props that we can go through. The Crown Australian has already started. They did not give us props on Prize Picks or Underdog for that. So they did have some head-to-heads posted. I didn't see a whole lot of value on that side of things. But at the very least, you could bet that on the sports books. But the Nedbank, we do have a full board for. So you can see the scoring average was also, just like round one, a little bit under par, 71.67, which compared to the last couple of years is easier than normal. And there was some wind out there today. It wasn't completely calm. So this scoring average, I think, is going to be pretty consistent over the next couple of rounds. And it tells me that the golf course is a little bit more receptive than what we're used to. In fact, there's even some rain in the forecast overnight and in the afternoon tomorrow. So there's a good chance that this golf course retains that moisture over the rest of this event. So I thought there was a chance maybe it went back to being even to an over par scoring average, but with the moving day setup and that moisture that they have in the forecast for tomorrow, I think it might even play easier, like a half a stroke under par compared to the first couple of days. And there's no cut line at the Nedbank, same thing at the Hero World Challenge, right? These are all, with the exception of the Australian Open, no cut events, the top two are. So you're not going to see a big difference scoring average-wise when you get some of the lower tier players out of there. So I think that this average is relatively accurate for tomorrow, just with the moving day pins potentially having that sort of effect. So the birdie average was 4.1 per round. That'll probably be at least 4 per round once again, if not with upside to get to 4.25 to 4.3 per round. It's what you can see here on Prize Picks are 2 heavily plus EV props. The first one will be this Adrian Sadier over on birdies. He was a top 10 birdie maker on the DP World Tour last year. And then Ewan Ferguson, he's about an average birdie maker last year on the DP World Tour. But over the last 5 seasons, he's been above average for the last 5 years in birdie or better percentage. So if the average is going to be like 4.1 to maybe 4.25 per round, these are both no-brainer overs. It's not even just my opinion on those. It's just cold hard facts. When you take a look at the sportsbook lines, Ewan Ferguson is minus 175 towards the over, and Sadier is even better value towards the over at minus 185. Now, unlike the props like that are at 2.58x here, where you're getting terrible value, right? If you were taking these two, even at minus 130, even if they are from the traditional analysis perspective, 2 props that I do really like, you're getting scammed when you're taking that 2.58x. You are not getting scammed when you're taking a minus 185, a minus 175 prop, and you're still getting 2.75x. You're getting the better payout and even better line value in both cases. And all you have to do is have average days in either case. You got an above average birdie maker, an elite tier birdie maker at 3.5. And the only reason why he's not even heavier juice towards the over is because he's towards the top end of the leaderboard, right? He's one of the best players that you have in that field. That kind of quote unquote pressure is what they have being held against him. So I think that one's a no-brainer. That's for the Nedbank challenge that's going overnight. So maybe a little bit of a waking cash that we can secure on that side. And then the prop we're going to take is also going to be for the Nedbank challenge. So this is going to be the Hard Rock Bet matchup that we're playing. The Hero World Challenge does not have their head-to-head board posted quite yet, but where I find the value on Hard Rock Bet, and it's just the kind of value in the kind of category, the kind of a spot where I find a lot of my bets is in this head-to-head board, because they're not always available on DraftKings, Underdog, some of these other major books. And Hard Rock Bet, whenever they can, it's just from what I've noticed with their handicapping process, is that they just copy these other books 100% of the time if they can. But if they don't have those lines to compare to, and these head-to-heads, which are unique, posted by Hard Rock Bet, they don't have that same luxury with. So you can see down here, I like this Higo prop versus Jane Shaper at minus 120 because it's a complete misprice. First off, if you take a look at the free ball odds, Higo is the clear favorite in that free ball. Shaper's the second favorite, but he's quite a long way behind with the odds. But if you take a look at the last 3 months, which I think is a good sample size for both these players, it's essentially the fall swing for both of these guys. They're just on different levels. In fact, Garrett Higo, if you take a look at the form for anyone in the world, might be the hottest player that we have in the world right now. Over the 4-event sample size, he's gaining 2.86 shots gained per round. That's almost 3 shots gained per round. That's Scotty Scheffler level stuff. His worst finish is a T7 over that 3-month stretch. It's just ridiculous how good Garrett Higo's been playing. It's been on PJ Tour events, by the way. This isn't slapdick DP World Tour stuff, right? I love James Shaper. He's one of my favorite young up-and-coming studs that we have on the DP World Tour. He's played 9 DP World Tour events over the last 3 months and a solid 0.54 shots gained per round. That difference, though, from Shaper to a Higo is over 2.3 shots from player to player, and Garrett Higo's doing it on the much harder tour on the PGA Tour side. So if you're telling me we're getting these guys at even money, it just makes absolutely no sense. But one is a potential PGA Tour superstar. I mean, that's how Garrett Higo has been playing over the last couple months. One is a potential player that's getting onto the PGA Tour at some point. And who knows how he's actually going to fare when he ends up getting over there. So minus 120 odds, I'll play that all day. I think we had the bet against David Bravado the day before. That one did not end up working out. But if you give me close to even money odds on stuff that I have priced closer to minus 200, like this prop right here, eventually we're going to make quite a bit of money on these sort of leans. So I trust my modeling, trust my handicapping process on that. And if you guys agree with that sort of a breakdown, feel free to go ahead and tail that on Hard Rock Bet. But for the rest of the exposure that I'm playing for this evening, you guys can find that on my Patreon page. As I said, I'll be trying to find some pairings for these different PGA props on the NFL side. When we get the board on Prize Picks, they ended up posting it at like 10 p.m. last night or something. So a lot later than what we had on Underdog. Once we get that board, I'll see what kind of value we have on Prize Picks too, because normally they have even more value and even more selection than what we have here on the Underdog side. Underdog normally just copy and paste the DraftKings board and then goes with that. Prize Picks will normally post a few more props than what we have on DraftKings. So perhaps some extra value that we can attack over there. The Patreon page is going to be the place to find all of that. On top of that, that's where you guys can find the spreadsheet that I was going through before. That has all the DFS projections on it. Also, my entire player pool for round number 3. And let's have ourselves a Saturday. It's should be a fun one. We've got 3 different golf tournaments going on at the same time, a whole bunch of sweats going on. It's hopefully have ourselves a weekend. And let's see, any last second questions we got? You said, any thoughts on Novak over on bogeys? Seems like it's free. I would not say it's free because the average is only like 2.4 per round, and it might go down to like 2.25. He is a worse than average bogey avoider, though. So I see what you're doing there. I don't completely disagree with that lean. Would I call it free, though? Absolutely not. Like, he's probably close to a 2.5, maybe like a 2.6 to 2.7 projection because he's a little bit worse than the field average. But, when we start calling a prop free, that's at 2.5 is when, it's projected for 4.5 or 5 bogeys, right? When he's like double that projection, nowhere close to that. So I'll give you a little bit of pushback on that one, but I don't think it's a terrible take if you're considering it. Am I watching any of the Australian Open? I've been trying to. I wasn't able to catch as much of round 2 as what I saw for round 1, but yeah, a windy Royal Melbourne, especially what I saw for Thursday, was a whole lot of fun to watch. I'll be doing so tonight and a little bit tomorrow for sure. He said, did I see that Joe Grinder's on Akshay's bag? I did. It's the double lefty narrative. That's what he was saying to the media last night. I like it. I think that personality-wise, they're both, very lighthearted, jovial folks. I think it's a great combination with those two. We'll see if it works out technically, right? Because the attitude can be there, but if they technically don't match up, it might not matter. And we're only going to get to see that with a sample size. So I hope it works out for them because that would be a fun pairing. And he said Goddard up versus Spieth at -112. So pretty much even money both sides. He said he liked Jordan quite a lot. So I bet on Jordan under 69.5 today. So I didn't mention that in the live stream last night. It was something I actually played after we got off the live stream. I thought about it for a bit before I took my favorite player for an under, because if I do so, I feel like people know, like, I like the guy. So I only do it when it really makes sense to bet it. I thought it made a whole lot of sense. I thought he was going to shoot a low score today, and he shot +1. So that's the only pushback I'll give you, right, is that he's rusty. And I thought maybe it's the optimism in me and wanting to see him play well. I thought maybe he'd come back earlier than we thought, and that wasn't necessarily the case. So on a 50-50 prop like that, because Goddard sucks at chipping, like, I think that's probably the best place to play him, right? Is I wouldn't really do it on like a strokes prop, or I wouldn't do it on like an over on birdies. But because he does have that matchup that might even be more lost than he is right now, I could see doing that. So yeah, it's kind of picking on Goddard, kind of playing our guy Jordan Spieth. I like Jordan though, so I'm not going to give you too much pushback either way. He said, I appreciate the time and info, Luke. Have a great day, bro. Likewise to you. That's all I've got here for this live stream though, guys. Best of luck with everything that you guys are going with. Hope to see you guys at the top end of some of those showdown contests. Let's take down a few of those props and also try and cash out from that perspective as well and have ourselves a moving day.